Lauri Markkanen should be an all-star. Will he be? Might be a different story. It's next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. Today, Lauri Markkanen should be an all-star. We'll talk about why and whether he actually will be or not when it's announced this afternoon on TNT. A week's worth of Will. Just went on a long road trip. 12 Will Hardy press conferences plus shoot-around talk every now and then. Let's review. Went back through my notes. Will had a lot of really interesting points during the week, so let's look at a week's worth of Will, and then we'll continue with our trade deadline series as we look at various teams and their rosters and what they have and don't have and whether or not they have something for us or whether we have something for them. As I said the other day, if you read the rumors about the Jazz and the things around the league, what's most interesting right now is there are just as many reports about the Jazz being a buyer as a seller, and maybe we're going to do both, and that's really interesting. Indiana, Clippers, Lakers, Grizzlies, Heat today are the teams that we're looking at. As I mentioned, this is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Gives you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully makes it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free. We're available on all podcasting apps. We're on YouTube. We're on all podcasting apps, and we're free. So subscribe, follow. If you're on YouTube, thumbs up. Appreciate that. You guys have done a great job of that. I might even try to start reminding you a second time during the broadcast in case you didn't. And if you have not followed, 5-star reviews are great. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the all lowercase code LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. Lauri Markkanen should be an all-star. Now, I hate the Dick Vitale game in which somebody like this says this, but then never has the guts to say who he should be in or who he shouldn't be in over. So I'm not going to do that. But let's just discuss Lowry for a second. Lowry is averaging 24 points a game, 9 rebounds, 2 assists. He is the only player on the roster, the Utah Jazz, when the year started, who was ranked in the top 100 players of the NBA. And yet the Jazz are at 500 or right around there and a play-in team at this point in time on an offense that at times recently has been one of the elite offenses in the NBA, spearheaded completely by Lowry. And while his numbers are literally the exact same as they were a year ago, like it's crazy. His scoring is down a tiny bit, but generally the exact same. His effective field goal percentage is actually up. His rebounds are the exact same. His assists are the exact same. His steals are slightly up. His points per game is slightly down. His minutes are slightly down too. He's playing 2 less minutes per game. He is taking a much larger burden. He has not had Mike Conley. He has not had a team with solid point guard play to set him up. He has had to do things himself at a much higher level than he did a year ago. He is a better player than he was a year ago. His unique skill set at 7 feet tall and shooting 39.6% from 3 makes him absolutely all-star caliber. And why he should be an all-star over a bunch of guys we're going to mention here in a second. Now, will he be an all-star? I'm not particularly hopeful. But let me get into efficiency and what you do offensively. And this takes us a little bit to those of us who you join us on Fridays to points gained. Like this guy, Lauri Markkanen, is one of the 7 most efficient offensive players in all of the NBA. And so when you start to look at what he's doing as a player offensively, and you start to compare him to other players in the NBA, he is a way more efficient offensive player. He's actually the 6th most efficient offensive player in the NBA last time I ran the numbers. Embiid, Giannis, Shea, Nikola, and Kevin Durant. All All-Stars. Domantas Sabonis is tough to keep off the All-Star team because and maybe Lowry's going to have to get in because of him instead of Domantas Sabonis. But he fits into this next level of group. But then when you start on the Western Conference, or even just these players we're talking about, they're all-stars. Every guy at this level of efficiency on these rosters is an all-star. Someone obviously is not going to be. That's a fake. But if you look at the West, Shea, Nikola, Jokic, Kevin Durant, Lauri Markkanen, Domantas Sabonis. Big guys are a little more advantageous in this, but Lowry does it with the 3. Kawhi Leonard, Karl Anthony Towns, Chet Holmgren, Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, Jalen Williams, James Harden, Anthony Davis. These are the most efficient, positively impactful offensive players in the NBA. And Lowry is on that top, upper echelon of guys. And that's why Lauri Markkanen should be an all-star. He has a defensive impact at 7 feet tall. He is one of the most efficient offensive players in all of the NBA. This is too subtle for the coaches around the league to vote probably, but the team is 24-24. He's had a harder role to do it this year than he has in the past. Last year, in other words. And he is carrying this team with the offensive efficiency that makes the Jazz who they are. So now does he? There are 7 selections to be made. Remember, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and LeBron James are already in. So there's 7 selections today. In my mind, there are 4 locks. Okay? Steph Curry, Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Kawhi Leonard. 4 locks. Kawhi Leonard, I don't think that's a question. I think Tony Jones wrote a piece and didn't have him in there, which I was surprised, but he's played 42 games. He's averaging 24.6 rebounds and 4 assists. He's the best player on maybe the best team. Probably not the best team, but right up there. They're 2 games out. Anthony Edwards has to get in. Minnesota has to have an all-star. And obviously, the Clippers have to have an all-star. 3 of the next 6 get in. Anthony Davis, Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, Zion Williamson, Paul George, Lauri Markkanen. 3 of those 6 get in. To me, it's going to come down to Lauri Markkanen or Paul George. So of those 6, I think Anthony Davis gets in. He's just been too good, too well recognized. I have a hard time understanding why he wouldn't. Now, he may not play. He missed a game the other night. I understand the Lakers have the exact same record we do. I understand that they're 24-24. But Anthony Davis, we can go to his numbers. He's averaging. I just think we all agree. We should all probably agree. He's been an all-star 8 times. He's going to be an all-star 9 times. Sacramento deserves somebody as an all-star. Is it De'Aaron Fox? Is it Domantas Sabonis? Fox is at 27 points. 4 rebounds, 6 assists, shooting 47% from the field and 30% from 3, 38% from 3. He has slumped recently. Sacramento has slumped recently. His January was not very good at 43% and 32% from 3. That would be only 22 points a game. That would be the argument against Fox. Domantas Sabonis, 20 points, 13 rebounds, 8 assists, 62% shooting. Have a hard time keeping him off. So I think Davis and Sabonis both make this team. And now we're into a game of De'Aaron Fox, Zion Williamson, Paul George, and Lauri Markkanen. And there's one spot. I think Fox gets outvoted. I think everyone decides Sacramento gets one All-Star and they take Sabonis and Fox misses out. And then the question is and then I think Lowry gets in over Zion. So I think it comes down to Paul George or Lauri Markkanen. Paul George is at 23 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 46% from the field, and 41% from three. And Lowry should make it over Paul George. Lowry should make the All-Star team over Paul George. It's an 8-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA player I'm talking about. I'm not lost on it. But I feel like Lowry has had a bigger impact. James Harden has impacted that team. Paul George is playing with other guys, and Lowry should have that spot. So I think it's Anthony. Now, what gets weird on that, and maybe it's right, because the 4 locks are guards: Curry, Edwards, Booker, and Kawhi's a wing. You now have taken Anthony Davis, Domantas Sabonis, and Lauri Markkanen as your 3 other players. It's also why I think Fox gets bumped. The idea that De'Aaron Fox, Zion Williamson, and Paul George are not all-stars, wow! So this is going to be tight. He deserves it. He should get it. His offensive efficiency, the amount he's carried the team, the amount he's better than he was a year ago, his increased passing, his increased leadership. Some of these are subtle that people don't know, are why Lauri Markkanen should be an all-star. Give me your thoughts. 4 locks. Do you agree? Curry, Edwards, Booker, Kawhi. And 3 of the next 6 get in: Anthony Davis, Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, Zion Williamson, Paul George, and Lauri Markkanen. Woo! Tough stuff. We're just getting started. A week's worth of Will. I kind of love this. We might make this a new feature on the show. Really interesting comments throughout the week from Will Hardy, and we'll touch on that. A week's worth of Will is next, as we're just getting started on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends over at eBay Motors. This is fun stuff right now because it's time for the eBay Motors Josh Lloyd combination that gets you your fantasy of the week. It's the eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Woohoo! All right, Josh Lloyd has the #1 fantasy basketball show in the country, Locked On Fantasy Basketball. eBay has the Guaranteed Fit. They have combined to give you 5 players to look at for your fantasy basketball team this week. Ayo Dosunmu, with Levine and Williams both hurt, Dosunmu has seen minutes, his usage bump, while being more aggressive offensively and maintaining efficiency. Jared Vanderbilt, the Lakers lineup seemed to work a little bit as of late. Vando in them, yet Ham has been stubborn in deploying them, still has fantasy value and on the rise. Josh Hart, gosh, he's good. Hart could be the big winner in the Randall injury and could see gigantic minutes for multiple weeks, particularly because Tom Thibodeau is his head coach. Paul Reed, for as long as Joel Embiid is out, like tonight, Reed is an elite fantasy ad, and Aaron Nesmith has been posting big numbers of late with defensive numbers and improved efficiency. Grab any of those for your fantasy team. They are guaranteed fits with 22 million parts for your #1 ride or die. You can also get a guaranteed fit at eBay to keep your ride running smoothly. Brake kits, LED lights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride for the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items apply. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The FanDuel Sportsbook, there for you, official sportsbook of Locked On and the official sportsbook of the sports partner of the NFL. Super Bowl week is coming. Here's the deal. You can bet, and if you win your first bet on any bet, you get $200 of bonus bets if you're a new customer. So new customers, join today, FanDuel.com/lockedon, and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or win more wins. You got it. It's all there. All sorts of the great Super Bowl bets, food, commercials, etc. Whatever it might be. Who scores touchdowns, Taylor shots, whether we get 23 seconds of Taylor or 34 seconds of Taylor, and freak people out about it. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and your FanDuel Sportsbook line for the night with the early announcement that you're going to have by the way, the Celtics are an 11.5-point favorite over the exhausted LA Lakers today. Jazz are a 5-point favorite over the Joel Embiid Philadelphia 76ers. And the Knicks are a 3-point favorite over the Indiana Pacers. That is FanDuel.com/locked on. How are you? Good. I'm glad to hear it. What's the best thing going on in your life? Oh, share that. Love to hear it. Those are uplifting things that give people mojo and juice. It's fabulous. Feel free to share it. Tonight's Jazz game is radio only locally. It's also available always on SiriusXM, always having the hometown feed. So grab it at SiriusXM, search Utah Jazz. Also available on the KSL Sports app, NBA app, and Utah Jazz app. All right. Weeks worth of will. Kind of love that. All right. Will tell us what he thinks of players, game, all sorts of stuff. So the first one I just loved is we did a whole show recently about the Jazz. For the everydayers, you'll remember that the Jazz don't have Kirby Puckett, which was a weird reference. But the idea was we just don't have that one guy to carry it. And Will actually finally talked about this. He talked about this, I think, after the Brooklyn game, where he said, like, hey, here's who we are. We play hard, we play together, we wear you down, and we eventually break through. And we've got to stay to that identity. We're not going to do it easy. There's no other way for us to do this. That's the way we're going to do things. The problem you kind of saw coming into the Knicks game, frankly, was that they had just as many guys. Then they were short 3 starters, and you're like, okay, well, maybe. And tonight we play a team that's really depleted. But that's how the Jazz have been able to do it. And I thought that, it was just interesting to hear Will say it because we've talked about it. We're kind of on it. And it is the fact that if you don't have Kirby Puckett and you don't have one guy who can carry the load totally every single night the way, Shea is or Anthony Edwards kind of is a little bit, though Cat obviously dropped 60 somewhere along the way and they lost, or the way Steph does, it just changes who you are a little bit. And so I think I thought that was a really interesting point. And also that Will's like, hey, that's who we are. We got to play hard and wear you down. And if we don't play hard, it doesn't go particularly well. The other one I thought just in post-game shows that was most interesting, the others I'm all going to choose are all from pre-games, was actually a comment Will made after the Knicks game of we got to understand that they're not all possessions are the same. And then this gets really interesting. This gets a little bit like of humbleness too. I think that like there was a possession I thought was really interesting the other night. So, and I just think it's a really interesting discussion about the game. So the Jazz get it to 61-60. And Lowry misses a hook, and then Sexton throws a bad pass for a turnover, and then Dunn turns it over, and then Sexton turns it over, and then Dunn's commits a foul. And all of a sudden, we're down 69-60. Like, not that the 3 previous possessions where we turned it over weren't vital, but this is a super vital possession. Like, the game is rolling. We're coming out of a set play. And I think this is, and I don't actually know the right answer on this. I honestly don't. So the play ends up, well, I know a little. 10 seconds into the shot clock. And that's the key piece to me on this play. John Collins takes the 3 and misses. Now, the reason this is so tricky is because in most circumstances, like if John Collins is open for 3, he's got to take it. I don't care what he's done making threes recently. He's got to take it. He's generally been pretty good from 3 this year. I think he's at 35% now, which is fine. Like that's above league average. That's fine. If that shot's there, he takes it. If they're not going to guard him, he has to take it. If Chris Dunn's not guarded, he has to take it. So generally and then the second thing is that generally I believe is that if you get a good look, you should take it because there's no guarantee another one's coming. Like you can always play good to great, but like if you get really good, take it because great's not always around the corner. However, in this circumstance, I do wonder, like John is, if I have it correctly, and actually let me make sure I have it right because I don't want to be wrong on this. John is like 3 of his last 17, 22, 24. 3 of his last 24 from 3. Like it's off right now. And I do think like at that point, you've got to have some self-awareness that like it's 69-60. We're on the ropes. This is a vital possession for us. Lowry and Collin are on the floor. 10 seconds in the shot clock. We've got another 14 seconds. Maybe we bypass that one. But frankly, Collin's got to make sure he doesn't lose the ball in the possession before. Chris has got to make sure he isn't throwing away on a bad pass on the one before that. So there's a lot to it. I don't want us to be singling out one person. But I thought that was really interesting by Will, where he's just talking about, we have these key possessions. Simone tried to attack Mikal Bridges in the open floor the other night. And it led to a 3 the other way and swung us from an 8-point game to a 12-point game, maybe 13. So those are the things Will's talking about that were interesting. All right. Here's a really interesting moment from Will, I thought. He was talking about Keyonte and Keontae's ability to drive both directions. Keontae's isolation numbers are super. He was talking about guard play, that you can only be physical as a guard with 2 feet on the floor. You have to be physical with one foot, but while you're driving. But you cannot be physical as a guard in the NBA in the air. And maybe that's a really basic concept. I just thought it was a nice little oh yeah, right? And so actually you see Jordan jump a lot and get in trouble with turnovers because he's playing it out in the air. Keyonte does a really nice job of making the contact while he's on the ground. And so that contact that you're making on the ground, and Keontae's doing a nice job of playing both left hand and right hand. He actually, as Will points out, he prefers to go to his left hand right now than his right, which is a great sign for his development. But I thought it was just an interesting little tidbit there from Will, for us to keep an eye on. You're going to be a physical guard. Think about Shea. It's always while you're on the ground. You're not physical in the air as a guard in the NBA. He did say he wants more first half aggression out of Keyonte George. All right. I nicely wrote down a note I cannot understand. That's really silly of me. Offensive ball are not relevant on one thing. Okay. Talked about Collin's energy. Collin, if you go to shoot around, is pumped at shoot around. 5th game road trip, Collin is pumped at shoot around. And he talked about that is helping out the team. The shoot around, he feeds the team. His energy is kind of getting everyone else to get going during games. From an on-court standpoint with Collin, talked a lot about Collin's pick and roll and passing, because Collin's passing on this trip was terrific. And how what he's really learned how to do is slow down and in pick and roll drop coverage play at a different speed and a different level than he has been before. And it's finding guys against drop. He used to just drive right into drop coverage at full speed. And often that was a turnover. And now he's playing that much slower, forcing the big to kind of commit one way or the other and be able to make plays off that. He talked about John Collins' development and success throughout the season and talked about pairing John Collins with Lauri Markkanen as something that they found to be successful. So that's really kind of letting John Collins play the 5 offensively and maybe playing the 4 defensively if we really want to get into it. John struggles a little bit with the 4 defensively, and he struggles a little bit with the 4 offensively and the 5 defensively. He's also really good at the other 2 things. So that's something that we're seeing there. When John Collins is on the floor with Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler is off. Okay. The Jazz are +9 and the offense is in the 91st percentile. Now, the problem is the defense is in the 16th percentile. There are not a huge amount of lineups for us, I think, with John Collins on the floor where the defenses are good this year, because our defense is 7 points worse per 100 possessions when John's on the floor than when he's off. Now, some of that's because the defense is just so much better when Walker's on, and that's the contrast, so that's not entirely fair to John. But the offense of combination of Lauri Markkanen and John Collins together without Walker Kessler is pretty terrific. And so Will talked about that a little bit. Talked about Kelly Olynyk thinks of himself as a guard and an artist, which I thought was interesting. Was asked why Keyonte is going to be okay through his struggles. I thought his struggles disappeared right after this game. This question was asked. This was early in the trip. And he talked about the fact that Keyonte just loves and lives basketball, and that a lot of guys don't, and that will get him through his struggles. And then the other one I thought was really interesting when he was talking about, this is what my note was that didn't make sense, and I have it, is the offense has been really, really good because it's not reliant on one thing. See, that's what they said. Offense, not as reliant on one thing. Didn't make sense to me. Does now. But the reason the offense has been so good over the last 10 or 15 games is they're not just living by the three. They're not just living by free throws. They're not just living by the rim, but they have a diversity of attack in how they're getting things done. So that's a week's worth of will. Let's look at the Indiana Pacers, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Miami Heat, and see whether or not they have trade targets that are worth us putting a focus on as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Locked On Jazz is brought to you in part by Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy and super fun for you over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks has a bunch of great opportunities for you, but it's really simple. No pros, no sharks. You choosing more or less on 2 to 6 stat projection players, and the winnings hopefully roll in for you. Plus, Prize Picks lets you combo football and basketball if you want to do something with the Super Bowl coming up. It also allows you to have a reboot policy if a player gets hurt. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Super fun. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in the NBA because it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go get your first deposit match up to $100 with prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Hiring is difficult and maybe the most important thing for a small business, and that's where LinkedIn comes in. LinkedIn has got incredible work right now. Hiring candidates, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's pretty crazy. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats. Yes, true. Locked on. Yes, true. That you do not have the time and resources to hire. So thankfully with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. Thumbs up on YouTube if you're listening. Appreciate it immensely. All right, let's take a look at the Indiana Pacers, who've really probably made their big move with the Pascal Siakam, and they now have Siakam as a free agent of the year, Miles Turner. Buddy Hield's at $19 million could, in theory, be available. I don't think so, but that's just a name that's possible out there. And otherwise, they really don't have a lot of pieces they're looking to move because Nebhard, Jackson, Smith, Neesmith, Halliburton, Walker are all $6 million or less on rookie contracts. Matherin's about $7 million. In theory, they could move TJ McConnell, who's got another year left on his deal, at $9.3 million, and then becomes an unrestricted free agent. But Indiana, Buddy Hield at $19 million is the only one switching. I will say, of types of players, Buddy Hield's got some weaknesses, but types of players the Jazz need, that to me is actually the player we need. We just need a dead-eye bombing three-point shooter. Clippers are pretty hamstrung. So Paul George, they're not going to move Paul George. They're not going to move Kawhi Leonard. They've signed him. Harden, they're not moving. Norman Powell is at $20 million, 18, 19, and 20 the next 3 years. PJ Tucker is at 11 with a player option for 11 and not playing much, so that's a little nerve-wracking. Zubac's at 11. Terrence Mann's at 11. They could do something with Norman Powell and Terrence Mann, but they probably got to get something back because those guys are both playing and important. Westbrook's only at $3 or $4 million. And then after that, they've got Coffey, Brown, Highland. They could do something small, throw somebody into they could throw somebody in somebody's exception or something of that sort just to save money because they're so far over the tax right now that their tax bill is $113 million. And so just a subtle move of a few million here or there of a Daniel Tice or a Brandon Boston, who's actually pretty good. Brandon Boston might be worth. They had high hopes for him in the offseason. Restricted free agent at the end of the year. They'll probably lose him in restricted free agency. Might be worth somebody trying to sign him. I don't know what rights would come with him on that, but that's actually a player that I know that when we were in Hawaii, there was a lot of talk that maybe this was his year to finally break out and just hasn't happened. Has been injured and never got on the ground. The Lakers have interesting, right? So D'Angelo Russell's most talked about at $17.3 million. And Russell then has $18 million next year as a player option. Rui Hachimura at 15, 17, or 18, 15, 17, 18 million this year, and then 2 years after that. I know everyone loves Austin Reeves, but I wouldn't be totally stunned if they moved him. Like if it meant that I don't think Austin Reeves is a player that I wouldn't move if I could get a really high level player. Like if Atlanta said to get DeJounte Murray, we have to have Austin Reeves, I think I'd be like, okay, maybe not. Maybe Austin Reeves is better. He was like number 5 pick and roll guard in the league last year. Gabe Vincent's got 3 years at 11. He's out for the season. Jared Vanderbilt jumps to 10, 11, and 12 for the next 3 years after this year. It gets a little funky. Taurean Prince is at $4 million. They've got pieces here. The Lakers can make a bunch of moves for players. And then draft pick wise, we own some of their picks. So they're a little hamstrung. New Orleans has this year's pick. They're swapping with New Orleans in 2025. We have their 2027 pick. So they can really trade their 2029 pick. I do not think they can trade their 2026 because of the 2025 restrictions, and they cannot trade their 2028 because of their 2027 restrictions to us. So they can trade their 2029 first round pick. They also have, I think they have a Clippers second round pick, 2 Clippers second round pick in their own for the next 2 years. They'd have, if they're looking after DeJounte Murray, it might be that 2029 first round pick that's going to be what they make. From a Jazz standpoint, we probably have some players that could help them. I don't know that we can get a 2029 first round pick for any of the guys that could probably help them. But we could fit any of those player slots. On the other end, like if you're taking 2 years of Rui Hachimura and you're setting them a player that's better than Rui Hachimura, then maybe at 25 years old, I don't know who that player would be on our roster, but maybe you are able to get a pick out of that. That would be a tight call. I don't think we can get a first out of them on that. The Memphis Grizzlies are super interesting because it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Like they just never got a chance to load this roster up. So Marcus Smart has got 20 and 21 on the books for the next 2 years. Do they move that? If they're not planning to pick up Luke Kennard's club option at the end of the year for $14 million, do they move that? Steven Adams out for the year. Is that a $12 million salary they move? So it will be really interesting to see what their approach is, but those are their pieces. They're certainly not going to put they would only move. I guess it's really a question of someone wants Luke Kennard or Marcus Smart for a run in the playoffs and they get something for that. They're not giving up, they're drawing assets at this point. Zaire Williams, who's been kind of on and off, is a year away from restricted free agency. They could move him now, but that would be a notch early in the process. And then the final team to look at today on this, and then tomorrow we'll look at Milwaukee, Minnesota, New Orleans, New York, and Oklahoma City, is the Miami Heat. The Heat have made their first big move, which is Terry Rozier. And so now the next question is whether Duncan Robinson having a great year, would they move Duncan Robinson's 18 million, 19 million for someone? Caleb Martin is making $6 million with a player option 7 next year, and Kevin Love's at 4. They can piece together without Duncan Robinson about 14, 15 million for a player. With Duncan Robinson, they can get to like 35 million. I don't know who that player is, but they still seem short to me. They're Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Terry Rozier is their core now. It feels short. Feels like they need another piece. That is Locked On Jazz today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Hopefully Lauri Markkanen's an all-star and we're celebrating, and the Jazz are back on the winning track. Jazz Sixers tonight, 8 o'clock. Jump on that one, radio only, and on Sirius XM. Thanks very much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz. We now send you to the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today. Have a good one.